On behalf of my mother who's not here, my brother, my sisters, we want to thank Shomrei Emunah. I can't do it. On behalf of my mother and my brother and my sisters, we want to thank Shomrei Emunah for having this Aliyas Neshama and the Siyum in memory of our father. We all grew up as a family here in Shomrei Emunah. We lived down the block. This was our home. This was my father's extended family and our extended family. I remember coming to Shomrei as a little young man, I guess 5 years old, 4 years old. My father davened here since 1948. My grandfather was on the plaque over here. I don't know what year he started davening here. And to add to what Rabbi Cohn said before, he only knew 4 of the members of the family. He only knew my Uncle Manny, my father, my Uncle Moshe Mesh, and my Uncle Seymour. But my Uncle Yankel also used to sit and learn here with Nachum Silberman and Bobby Blau. They had a shia sitting in that room over there. And Rabbi Cohn also didn't know my other uncles who also lived in the neighborhood. My Uncle Aaron lived in Flatbush at the time, my Uncle Nathan in Brighton. They were all Shomrei Torah mitzvahs, and they were all one big happy family. I remember coming to Shomrei Emunah every morning with my father, sitting right over here, 7 o'clock minyan, together with everybody else at that table sitting there, Charlie Goldman, Leon Goldman, Mr. Gimple, Mr. Olshan sitting over there. We have a very long history with Shomrei Emunah. My father used to daven for the Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. Mr. Scheinman must remember it. Originally, when we first started davening here, we were downstairs by Hashkam, and we would sit up front here, so no, right in the back and behind the bima. And then later on, my father, when we got older, we davened upstairs. Chazam Reuben was like part of our family. Chazam Reuben, before he came here, when he came, he was a single man, and he lived in my grandmother's house on 49th Street. And Shabbos afternoon, we would all go into the room, and together with my Uncle Yankel, and we would play hide and go seek. Right? My brother Moshe, Friday nights, would imitate Chazam Reuben. He'd put a chair in front of him, a chair in the back of him, and a bag on his head to imitate the Chazan. He was a young boy at the time, and you emulate what you see. And we all grew up, we all take part in our communities today. I'm active in my shul in Edison, and Moshe's active in his shul in Flatbush. And Shomrei Emunah was just a part of our life. I remember my father coming home from work. He'd come and daven Ma'ariv and come here to the Chevra Shas. My father, just before he was nifter, 2 weeks before he was nifter, the Beit Tuvei Ha'ir honored him for instituting the Daf Yomi and for completing Shas 7.5 times. This was 2 weeks before he was nifter. Afterwards, and Rabbi Lau, the chief rabbi of Israel, came to honor him. He was supposed to come but didn't come because he got tied up in the Din Torah. And after he was nifter, he came back. And somehow there's a video that I sent to Mr. Salver that you could all view. There's a story that's told about this man who had a dry goods store, and he gets a notice from the courts that they wanted to serve on the jury. And the man was a sole proprietor and he couldn't afford to leave the business. So he sent his son down to the court and he went to the judge and he said to the judge, "My father is a sole proprietor and he can't afford to leave the business. Could you please excuse him from the jury?" So the judge said to the young man, "If I excuse your father from the jury, what am I going to say to everybody else? It's not fair. How are we going to have a court system? How are we going to have a jury system?" So the young man said to the judge, "If you had more men around like my father, you wouldn't need a jury system." That was my father. He was the most erelcher, ish yasher Tom Yasher, and he was, like a lot of people have told us, and we knew without them telling us, that he was a gentleman's gentleman. He was always proper and kind to everybody. He was the most honest businessman. Moshe and myself, we worked with him in the store, and he didn't take home money for himself unless his vendors were paid, and then he took for himself. He never cheated anybody out of any money, and his family was the most important thing to him. And we all try to emulate him. It's a very hard task to follow. He was the best, and we all love him. There's a story that's told about this man who's in Israel, and he's walking in the fields of Yaffo. And he goes over to the fields in Yaffo, and there's an orange tree. He goes over to this orange, he picks the orange, and he sucks out the juice from this orange. And the owner of the field comes over to him and says, "Ganef, you're a ganef, you're stealing from the fruit. Don't you know it says in the Torah lo signov?" So the man says, "What a country this is. I come to Eretz Yisrael, I'm caught stealing, and I got a Devar Torah at the same time." My father went to Eretz Yisrael because this is where he wanted to be, and he was there, and he learned Torah. After davening, like Rabbi Friedman said, he was in shiurim day and night. Even when he was sick, he went to all the shiurim. After I took him out of the hospital in January, he came home and he sat in the shiur. My father was a special individual. And Shomrei Emunah was a very big part of his life. There's a story that's told about a man who was coming home one Erev Shabbos. He gets off the B train and he stops by West End Florist. And he wants to buy some flowers for his wife, and he sees two plants in the store. And they're both exactly the same plant. So he goes over to the storekeeper and says, "What's the difference between the two plants?" He says, "This one is $35 and this one's $45. So if you know my father, he would say, what's the difference? My father would say $10. The storekeeper says, "This plant over here is a real plant, and the other one is a fake plant, is an artificial plant." And what's the difference between an artificial plant and a real plant? An artificial plant has no room for growth. It's stagnant. It stays the way it is. No growth. But the real plant, you water it, and it grows and it grows and it grows. My father's plant, he watered us, and our family grew because he watered us and took care of us. And that was the difference between a stagnant and the real plant. I have one more story that I'd like to say about my father. Every morning when you wake up in the morning, we all say brachas. And one of the brachas we say, Asher Asa Li Kol Sarki, that Hashem should give us all the things that we want. Now I was thinking, how was he able to say that at the end? Is this what he wanted, to be sick? Did he want to have all these sicknesses, be in the hospital, out of the hospital, in the hospital, out of the hospital? No, this is not what he wanted. He wanted his family to be together. He wanted us to be happy. He wanted to take care of us. These are the things that that's how my father was able to say that bracha, She'asa li kol sarki. My father was a special man. And we all love him. And he should be a Melitz Yosha for all of us. He should be a Melitz Yosha for my son Menachem Mordechai ben Ophira. And he should be a Melitz Yosha for all Klal Yisrael. Amen. Moshe Rabbeinu sent out to the Meraglim to see Eretz Yisrael. We'll take 1 second. So Moshe sent out the Meraglim. My father sent out his brothers, his sisters, his nephews, his grandchildren to see Eretz Yisrael first, and then he came. My father loved Eretz Yisrael. That's okay.